Hello, thank you for joining me. Today I'm just standing beside the modern platform at Leekbrook Junction on the Churnet Valley line. If you look just up there, you can just see the Grade 2 listed Leekbrook signal box. So what we're doing today, the Churnet Valley Railway isn't running. It's one of my projects to gradually explore all the stations of this railway, all the way south down the Churnet Valley and all the way north up through Leek to Rudyard Lake. I've already taken some shots of trains going past, but what we're going to do today is we're going to explore one of the lesser known former branches of the Churnet Valley Railway. So if we get to the end of the platform, you can see the railway line. Just up there you can see Cheddarton Tunnel. The bridge over there, that's the A520. So this is the Churnet Valley line, which opened in 1849. Leekbrook station wasn't added until 1904, I believe. The reason it was a junction is because straight that way went to Leek. There was a line that went over there, that direction, Stoke-on-Trent, and there still is a line heads up that way, up into the hills. Currently it only goes as far as Ipstones. Hopefully one day it will go back to Caldon Low. If you just look over there, you can see milepost 17.5, so that must mean we're 17.5 miles away from where the Churnet Valley Railway leaves the Stoke to Derby line. So as I said, this section is reopened as the Churnet Valley Railway, and hopefully one day will get to be a bit longer than it is today, but my plan is to explore all of the stations, past and present. So I thought we'd start here at Leekbrook as it's a junction and we can quite literally go north, south, east and west from here. But what we're going to do today, I'm just going to show you the last we're going to see of the Churnet Valley Railway today. That way, looking towards Cheddarton and all the way down to Foggle, you can see Cheddarton Tunnel. That's Leekbrook Railway Station, which it was added in 1904, it closed in 1956, and then in 1996 the Churnet Valley Railway started running trains here again, and a few weeks ago they formally reopened the station. But what people didn't know was from somewhere here there was another railway known as the San Edwards Tramway, which went up to San Edwards Hospital. So what we're going to do, we're going to follow that railway. So it went down through this gate, it's now a permissive path, so we're going to go and have a look and see where the railway went. It took me quite a few times to work out exactly where the trackbed was, because what I think we're walking on now isn't exactly obvious as an old railway trackbed, but it's a bit of an unusual railway. It was a light railway. Now it really doesn't look like you're supposed to go along there, because you can see a palisade fence, but around the end of the fence the path goes round there, and as I walked down I've seen plenty of other people walking on it, so obviously I think it's a permissive path, which means, for those who don't know what a permissive path is, it basically means it's open as a path, but they can close it without any such warning if they wish to. So we're just going to go up here, we're heading up towards the hospital, St Edwards Hospital, which I'm going to tell you a bit about. So what happened was there was a need for a mental hospital in this part of Staffordshire, so various sites were surveyed, and the site up on the hill above Cheddarton was chosen. So construction started in 1895. Now, to get the 18 million bricks required up to the site, the obvious thing to do was to build a railway. So with the Churnet Valley Railway over there already existing, they built a light railway up here. It was standard gauge so that wagons could be transferred. They wouldn't need to unload and reload at Leekbrook Junction, so the trains could arrive at Leekbrook, and one of the locomotives, I believe there was only one, it was a Manning Wardle saddle tank, two of which survive in preservation today. There's Sharpthorne at the Bluebell Railway and there's Sir Berkeley at the Middleton Railway. So imagine, for those of you who don't know what one looks like, if I can I'll find a picture, because Henry's Adventures has featured them in the past. We'll find a picture and I'll post a picture so you can see. So if you imagine the little saddle tank steaming its way, it's a bit of a gradient. I don't actually know what the gradient is. If anyone does, then please do comment and tell me. So the little steam engine would have steamed up here. It didn't have a cab roof, I don't think. With a few wagons of the 18 million bricks. I don't know how many times it went up and down, but must have gone on for a few years. that they would have steamed up and down here. Then when the hospital was opened, the tramway was passed over to the council, and what the council decided to do was to open it as a passenger line, and they electrified it. Well, also it wasn't just as a passenger line, it was also to supply coal, because the hospital was mainly self-sufficient, so it had its own generating plant for electricity, and pretty much everything else was made on site. But the one thing they obviously did need, and they couldn't be self-sufficient on, was coal. So coal would have been taken to Leekbrook Junction, and an electric tramway locomotive, which they purchased second-hand from Wolverhampton, would have, at 2 wagons at a time, would have pushed them up this incline. So now if you imagine a little electric locomotive, there'd have been wires, probably not as many trees, pushing 2 wagons of coal up here. But they did also run a passenger service, so I believe it was the same locomotive. I think they only ever had the one electric locomotive. I assume the Manning Wardle steam locomotive was probably sold, or it probably belonged to the contractors, so when the contractors left, they took that locomotive with them. So I believe that's what happened. It'd be great one day to think if we could get Sharp, Vaughan or Sir Berkeley on the Churnet Valley Railway, pose them at Leekbrook Junction. That really would be recreating history. So we're just going along past some old farm buildings. I don't know how obvious it'll be, but just over there, I don't know if the camera's going to pick it out, but if you look across the field, that embankment you can see, that is the Stoke-on-Trent to Leek line, which the track is still in situ, and we'll definitely go and explore that in the future, but currently no trains are running along that railway. So we're going to carry on up here. So it's not a particularly long line, it's less than a mile long, and we're just probably about halfway now, so we're coming up here. So as I said, I told you about the freight side. The passenger side, I believe the same locomotive, electric locomotive, either hauled or propelled an ex-London horse tram car up here. So passengers who were visiting relatives or friends who were patients in the asylum could travel on these on the service they provided. So we're going up here now. I was going to do this video in 2 parts, but it's shorter than I thought, this railway, so we're kind of coming up to the hospital, so I think we'll make it one. So coming up here, so you can see we've been gaining height from the valley floor. It looks like, I don't know, was that possibly a quarry in the woods down there? So we're going up the incline. I'd love to have seen it in its day with the little electric tram locomotive pushing the wagons, or indeed the passenger carriage up the hill. It must have been quite a unique railway to ride on. So as we're coming up here, we're coming up to where's a bit of the former trackbed we can't access, but something rather unusual happened. It must be due to the gradient. Although we've been coming up at an incline, we're still not quite at the height required to come into the hospital at ground level. As you can see, there's an embankment still going up. So what the tramway did, and it's again more the sort of thing you don't get in this country, the thing you expect on places like Ecuador or in other countries, it did a Z. So if you think about it, you couldn't go forwards, went backwards. So we get to here, there's a road, we're just going to go through this gate. There's a sign, a modern sign, but there'll be no mistaking it. It clearly says Old Tramway, which is where we've just come up. So it obviously crossed the road here, or maybe this road wasn't here. No, I don't know. It carried on what now appears to be the drive to someone's garden. Went there a couple of 100 yards, and then it had to reverse in this direction along top of this bank. So what we're going to do, we're going to skip out that section, we're going to walk up this road, and we'll find the former head shunt of where the railway went. So there'd been a head shunt up there. The train would have then reversed along just above me before then going forwards again into the hospital itself. So it must have been quite an exciting ride for those, whether any enthusiasts ever did come up here for the ride, I don't know, or whether it was indeed a public service. It may have only been open to people who wished to go to the hospital. So when we get to here, this is the road, so this isn't tramway. Here is about here somewhere. This is the next section of former trackbed. So the tram down there would have gone along there, reversed to about here, then gone forward again. So we'll now go forward on what would have been the final journey into the hospital itself. So for those who don't know, there is various other, or was, should I say, various other hospitals which had quite unusual light railways. It's quite a fascinating subject. Not a huge amount of them, but they're very dotted out around the country. So I think there's Hellingley Hospital in East Sussex. I know that's certainly a hospital. Whether that was the one that had an internal electric railway, I'm not sure, but there certainly was a hospital or a mental asylum like this in Sussex which did have an internal railway. So as we come along here, you can see the various modern back gardens of the modern houses which were built when the hospital was closed, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. So as we got to about here, imagine tramway would have gone that way, so they'd have come from that way, and then here there'd have been a set of points and it'd have swung round that way into the hospital itself. So I'm not sure exactly where the station was and whether there was, I assume perhaps there was a station somewhere and a goods yard somewhere. So as we just come round here, we now start to come into the former hospital site. Now what happened was the hospital, it opened in 1899. It could host 600 patients, so 300 men, 300 women, and it was eventually closed in 2002 and sold to Redrow Homes, who redeveloped it, but they kept all the Grade 2 listed buildings. So we're going to have a look at some of them now. So we'll start Hospital Chapel. Now I'm not sure what its current use is. Looking at it, some of the windows appear to be broken, so I have a bit of a sad feeling it might just be not in use at all. But if we look here, these are all modern, these buildings. So I think the tramway probably came about across here, swung across round into this courtyard, and you can see in front of us one of the most striking features of the former hospital is the water tower, which I believe is flat. So if anyone, those who live in those flats, they must have a really lovely view of the Churnet Valley, the Caldon Canal. I wonder if they can even see the steam trains or indeed other trains at Leekbrook Junction. I don't know, but that is really impressive. And then you've got the Hospital Chapel behind me. So I think what must have happened is somewhere, maybe not quite here, but the tramway probably ran about along the alignment of this car park and then crossed what today is now called Willow Drive. This is Beech Tree Drive, that's Willow Drive. I think it probably crossed the road and terminated there somewhere, but I'm not entirely sure on that one. I've only ever seen one picture of the tramway when it was in use, and that was in the Churnet Valley Railway's guidebook. So if you ever go on the Churnet Valley Railway, buy their guidebook and you can see a picture. So that's the old water tower. It's pretty tall. You can see how, I assume they've been added at a later date, but it's had these metal bands put around it, sort of thing Fred Dibner would have had the job of climbing about on the tower, putting them up. I think he'd have rather had that job on a tower rather than knocking them down, as he was more better known for. But yeah, from the top window up there, must be a really impressive view of the countryside. So I think somewhere either here or there, because this building is original and so is that, the tramway terminated. I'm not entirely sure. So we're just going to have a look at one more thing now, which is the original, or not original because they're all original, but front of the hospital, which is this building here. We're just going to go out the front. So I believe it would have been men's buildings on this side and women on the other side. And in the men's building there are various workshops such as carpentry, broom making, bricklaying. I suppose the idea to help rehabilitate them for when they went back into society. But I'm not entirely sure I couldn't find any information on what workshops they had for the women who were patients here. So yeah, I don't know on that. If anyone does know, then you're welcome to comment and tell me. So this is now, we're just coming up to the grand entrance of the hospital. You can see some lovely carved stone. So yeah, quite an interesting place, and as you can see now, it's just it's become houses, but you know, not your usual housing estate. Quite an interesting one. As I said, it was sold to Redrow Homes. Now, there's one thing I like about Redrow Homes: you can always tell them when you see them, as opposed to other people. If you look at those houses over there, they're modern Redrow Homes, but they look like the sort of thing you see in suburban London. They look a bit like Nash houses. So whether there's any link there, I don't know. If Redrow is the modern descendant of Nash, who built so many houses in London suburbia and indeed other places, I don't know. But if you do know, just comment and tell me. But maybe they just are a similar design. But because of that design, I can always tell a Redrow home when I see one. So I'm going to leave the video here at the front of the Chedldon Hospital, or the Chedldon Mental Asylum. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.